for some reason, we keep stringing together pieces of content and trying to be like, if I tumble you through all these things, you'll trust me eventually. Well, there's this proven vehicle from outside our echo chamber called the show, which is uniquely and expressly built to hold attention, to build trust, to spur word of mouth.
Content marketing is a staple of modern B2B marketing. What started as a corporate blog to support SEO and inbound marketing strategies is now a diverse discipline that includes writing, designing, and producing a wide range of content formats for a variety of digital channels. From blogs and ebooks to podcasts and videos, from following the formula to leading with creativity, and from a goal of attracting attention to a focus on keeping people engaged. Content marketing is going through a renaissance, and today we're speaking with the Leonardo da Vinci of the craft, who is discovering new ways to build brand and to create the ultimate connection with buyers through a format that's changing how we think about content. Welcome to Creating Connections, the show that explores the human element in an increasingly digital business world. I'm your host, Tyler Lessard, and today we're speaking with Jay Acunzo da Vinci, or Jay Acunzo for short, host of my favorite business podcast, Unthinkable, author of Break the Wheel, and founder of Marketing Showrunners, a new initiative aimed at helping businesses launch their own branded shows as a way to create an unfair competitive advantage. His work and his ideas are a culmination of unique experiences in both broadcast media and B2B content marketing.
If you trace the bio, sort of the LinkedIn profile, connect like different stops along the way, you can kind of see where the perspective comes from. So from sports journalism into PR a little bit just as an intern at ESPN, and then into Google as a digital strategist, and HubSpot and startups and a VC firm, and kind of all the different stops in tech where I was doing content marketing the whole way. Then the last 3 years as a writer, speaker, kind of observer and studier of these things. I think we're living through this really interesting and very fundamental shift in all of how business is done, and certainly the way it affects marketing. Mm-hmm. And we're not really talking about the shift itself. We're kind of talking about the way the industry, and by that I mean marketers, is responding to the shift. Mm-hmm. The way we're responding is stuff called video marketing and content marketing and ABM. And, so right. These are the symptoms. These are the responses to a shift. The shift itself is very easy to sum up, but I think it's difficult for brands to get on board with, which is marketing is no longer about grabbing attention. Marketing is about holding attention. And I think great marketers today understand that great marketing is not about who arrives, it's about who stays.
Right.
And this has very real repercussions for how you should operate as a team, how you should approach different forms of content, how you should be thinking about building your brand. It's definitely a shift that I think a lot of us need to overtly stare in the face a little bit more and make like real decisions based on.
Yeah, I love that perspective. And I have often, I think that this idea that people have, the attention of less than a goldfish, right? It's a red herring. People will pay attention to ideas and content that they care about. I mean, I'll consume, a full season of Stranger Things over the course of 24 hours because,
right.
That is great content that I actually want to engage with, right? My attention span isn't the problem. It's a lack of tolerance for, information and content that isn't interesting, relevant, or that doesn't meet the bar of what I'm looking for as a consumer. Right?
I liken this to, when I worked in venture capital for 3 years, we invested in very early stage startups. And so these tech companies were, two people in a garage at a prototype or a beta test of a software product. It was very, very early. And so you have to hear hoofbeats before you see horses. And so that way you're like, okay, what's coming in the market? What are people interested in buying or doing? And what are the problems that different industries are facing that new products could help solve? And where's that transformation going to happen? Well, you port that over to marketing and you kind of see how when things become a trend, entrepreneurs are building products to try and help people and take advantage of it. And marketers are thinking, okay, my boss is going to email me about this pretty soon. Or, in the negative sense, how could we abuse this trend and just squeeze it for everything it's worth and then move on to the next one, right? We trend hop. And so the metaphor I'd use here is when the wave crashes and it goes back out to sea, anybody who's around just to ride a wave, they get washed away. But if you really dig in to the fundamentals underneath all that, you'll be fine. And so people who are like, we need snackable content and short form content and all this stuff, they're trying to ride a wave. They're just like content is a thing. And now we hear this goldfish BS, and it is largely debunked if you do some reading.
Yes.
It's like people are like, we need to make it shorter. Actually, people will watch it. People will listen. People will consume it if it's good enough. But being good doesn't feel like it's something you could buy a tool for. It feels like something that you have to do yourself as a team, and it is. And I love that because marketing has always been about people. We got a little bit too enamored with the tech, a little bit too enamored with the optimization. Now I think the pendulum is swinging back, or already has, to great creative, great connections. There's the name of this show, and actual resonance instead of just empty reach.
Now, if you follow this show, you'll know that Jay and I are completely aligned on this idea that the B2B marketing pendulum has swung too far to the side of digital and automation, and that we need to bring it back to a place where creativity and brand affinity are a part of everything we do, and that it's not all about conversions, but it's also about connections. Now, I've followed Jay for a number of years, and it seems like every week he drops something utterly quotable on his social feed. And one thing he said recently that really resonated for me was that creativity is the work in today's world of marketing. It made me pause and think about how I approach my own work and how my team tackles projects, and to what degree we embrace this idea of continuous creativity. So I asked Jay to expand on this quote and to describe in his own words what he means when he says creativity is the work.
Yeah, we hear these ideas, creativity, innovation, and I feel like it devolves into trying to manufacture a spike in the numbers.
Yeah.
And it devolves into pulling what I call random acts of creativity. So we start to jump in a room and brainstorm and hammer this out and, trend hop it. We basically don't have a sustainable approach, right? And I think the root cause of that is we're trying to change after it's too late. So there's this phenomenon that we face with our content called emotional decay, which takes place over time. So essentially, one thing that is refreshing and well received in the marketplace for your audience, one thing that your team is just intrinsically motivated and excited to create, that grows stale really quickly, whether it's because the market catches up to it and now all your competitors are doing that too, or it's become so predictable that now the game is optimization. You kind of automate away the ingenuity and the improvement of it. And there's a risk factor in changing from the tried and true because it could get better, but maybe it also gets worse, right? So it's good enough, but that's fine for us for now. Or maybe the third factor is your team actually starts to check out mentally and emotionally. But whatever the case, you get this drop off over time. The more we do that one thing that one way, from a great little spike in the numbers to stagnation to complete peril and panic, and only then are we actually getting creative. Only then are we saying we got to change our behavior, right?
Right.
And so my thesis is, if we usually change after something stops working, what if we switch our behavior to change what's working while it's still working? Not in big stunt-like random act fashion, but through little wrinkles, like refreshing changes on the status quo implemented all the time. So that's what I meant by that. It's we treat creativity like a stunt double for the real work. Like we call it in periodically to do something to fix it and save it. But creativity is not a substitute for the real work. It is the real work.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you look at that in practice, so I think there are individuals who will just bring that naturally, and there are others who that's not part of their human nature, and to your point, even those who do bring it, they can get stale and tired over time and start to lose it. Have you seen things that work with respect to leadership and how leaders can drive that notion of continuous creativity within their organizations?
I think it starts with taking these concepts that do feel big and ephemeral and sort of ineffable and making them concrete, kind of breaking it down into, here's what we mean when we say innovate. Because when we hear someone scream innovate, or we hear someone say we need a brainstorm meeting to save the numbers, the work, the project, right? Yeah. It does have this ill effect on the way we behave. It becomes like a chore, right? And so we kind of don't enjoy the process as much. We'd rather blink our eyes or have somebody tell us what to do. Or if we're not feeling like a chore, we're at least like, I do love this work, but I'm so stressed out, I can't really be mindful of it. So a leader, I think, is in the business of making complexity seem simple and attainable, right? Because that's the way you lead somebody to something they're not yet doing. That's what leaders do. If you're just pandering to what's going on and just asking for more of the same, that's not leadership. That's maintenance. That's the classic management idea. And I think a lot of us are now wiser and know we want real leadership. So when you think about creativity and you term it as ongoing, consistent creativity, not just random stunts, breaking that apart into what it is, small, refreshing changes on the status quo. Great. I can get on board with that. It's not risky for me as the practitioner. It's not risky for me as the leader if we're making small changes constantly to match how the buyer's expectations are changing. Okay. So what is that? How do we execute on that? Well, there's only 5 small changes you're capable of making on your content. That's it. There's 5 changes. So you can reuse something that's working. So your podcast is going well. People love the host. Why don't we increase the number of minutes the host has a monologue for? Because people love her. So reuse something that's working. You can repurpose it. That's actually ripping it out of one project and putting it on a new one. So the podcast host is now hosting a video show or emceeing the annual company event. So you can reuse, repurpose, remix. We can add refreshing new elements to something. So the podcast is growing stale. Let's get creative. Well, don't panic, right? Don't steal from somebody. Let's remix the show. Find a co-marketing partner. We're going to do a mini series. Or let's take one topic and go deep for 3 episodes. We can remix it, bring in new and refreshing elements to something that is steady state or stale. You can actually replace something. So bad news, Sally, you're not the best host in the world. So we're going to bring in a new host and give this show new life. Or you can refine something, which is to remove different parts and pieces to whittle it down to something better and maybe more basic, or remove something entirely, right? So everybody does a lightning round at the end of their podcast, 10 questions rapid fire. Maybe somebody did that early on and it was innovative, but everyone does it. So why don't we just limit it to 3 very short, very important questions, or we're going to remove the entire segment. So you can refine it. And so when you term creativity like that, take something that's working or something that's stale and make a small change to it. And it's only one of these 5 changes. Now you open up a world of possibility to your team. And as a leader, it feels like the team is empowered to decide what those changes are and to what piece of the work.
Yeah, it's an interesting approach because we often think about creativity as being so disruptive to the status quo, and that the expectations are so high with respect to when somebody says innovate or be creative. And I know I've felt that myself, where you just get paralyzed and locked because you're I can't come up with that next big idea, right? And what's going to be that big step function?
It's the classic blinking cursor, or the quiet in the room where we're all trying to come up with the next thing. But I think that's I'm guilty of this too, because I love the big idea. I love creativity. I love when something feels radically new, but turns out we actually can't create something from nothing. Like it's, unless you're a deity, you cannot create something from nothing. And even then it's like the deity exists before. This is a different conversation. Is God real? No. Okay. Different show, but there's always a status quo. There's always preconceived notions of the team, of the buyer, of the audience. You cannot start out from a position of nothing. So creativity isn't creating something from nothing. In other words, innovation doesn't require invention. I think it's all about reinvention. Right. That these constant small changes, this process of like discovery that you're always on to find new and increasingly innovative ways of doing the work.
When you put content creativity through the lens of the 5 re's, reuse, repurpose, replace, remix, or refine, it gives you a beautifully simple framework to fuel continuous creativity within your work. And it not only ensures you're always striving to improve your results, but that you're constantly reinventing your own unique formula and discovering your own best practices. This idea of discovering and continually rediscovering your own unique best practices is something that Jay dives deep into in his latest book called Break the Wheel. So I asked him to share some insights from the book and what he learned himself while researching this idea.
Finding best practices is not actually the goal. Finding the best approach for you is.
Right.
I think everybody would get on board with that in theory. Now, the problem is now you move into reality and we don't have a system for doing that. How do you find the best approach, not in general or on average, but the best approach for you in your rather unique context, your situation? Again, we don't have a system for that. And you can blame any number of things. And in the book, I find some psychological barriers to making those decisions based on your context instead of a generality. There's some real reasons in the brain why we don't do that. I don't want to belabor that point right now, though. But basically, the system we use, or the substitute for having a real system to make that kind of choice, it's a shortcut called the best practice, right?
Right.
So what's the
Right.
best approach for you? I don't know. I don't have a system to figure that out. So I will use a shorthand for that system called the best practice.
Right.
But there's a lot of issues with best practices because they miss variables from your situation, notably your team, but also your specific customers and the insights you have about them specifically. And thirdly, the thing we all point to, which is our resources, right? So your context is really just three knowable things that are present whenever you make a choice at work. There's you, the person or people doing the work. Then there's your customer, the audience, whoever the work is for. Then there's your means to make the work happen, your resources.
Mm-hmm.
And I always found that if we started by understanding those things first and asking really good questions about them, we can kind of set up a decision-making filter for ourselves. And so if we have a new idea, or we find a best practice, or we know there's a hot trend, or there's an old school conventional thing we're doing still, all that stuff has to get squeezed through our filter to have it make sense for us. So the book was this journey through science and story to try and figure out what are the best questions we can ask to investigate our unique situations, such that when we make a choice, we can make it faster, we can make it better because it's customized to our situation, and it doesn't matter if there's a lot of information around us. In other words, we can get rid of that overwhelm we all feel. So that was the whole concept behind Break the Wheel.
Yeah, no, it's interesting, and I love how you explore a little bit of the art and science, if you will, of that process. Was there anything as you were really researching those ideas and digging up the stories and digging into the science, was there anything that really surprised you that sort of, flew in the face of your traditional bias?
Yeah, I'm someone I'm very driven, I'm motivated, I'm passionate about my work. And I think, people who are and people who advise you to be, they tend to talk about setting goals, right? So you set goals based on outcomes and, they're kind of mile markers that you see in the distance. And that mile marker or kilometer marker, because I know we're talking to somebody in Canada here. If you have this desire to reach that place in the future and you put the goal down, it's like you're articulating what and maybe when, right? These are facts in the future. But it turns out that the way to reach those goals, to get those outcomes, is to actually rethink how we set goals and to use something instead of a metric, but you use something called an aspirational anchor. So here's an example really quick so we can sort of crystallize it in our minds. Rather than say, I don't know, grow your podcast downloads 50% month over month, right? So for the next month, 50% more downloads on our podcast. Now, putting aside how questionable the download is as a metric for marketers, but that's the goal. Okay. Yeah. It's far better to say, let's create the most entertaining and insightful show for this specific group of people exploring that specific topic. Because when you say, let's create the most entertaining and insightful show for them about that, you will, as a byproduct, if you succeed there, grow your downloads.
Right.
And what this does, this aspirational anchor, it combines two variables from your own situation, which is your intent for the future. So there's maybe that goal, but also your hunger, like some kind of dissatisfaction you have with your work today. And that articulates the change you need to make. When we have a goal, we don't know what change in our behavior we need to reach it. So we maybe just rely on the tried and true, but we amp it up or we invest more in it. And so maybe that's not the best approach. Or we just graft onto some new trend or rely on some guru who told us to do it that way. But if you have an aspirational anchor, it forces you to actually look hard at your current behavior and find the change you need. Another great example, a very simple one, instead of let's grow our Twitter followers, how about let's show the world how fun and relevant we are? And then you will grow your Twitter followers. That's an aspirational anchor. I think it's more inspiring. I think it's easier to get on board with as a team. And I think it's about how can we uniquely, as a team, as people, we don't exist in anyone else's context, do this work. And it forces you to bring your full self to that work.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's interesting because the way that you talk about it, you start to now remove yourself from the mechanics of the way you traditionally think about, to your point, those best practices for, if we want to grow our followers, we're going to do A, B, and C. Because often those are things that may not be aligned to even long-term growth. They may not be aligned to your brand. They may be shortcuts, right? Which is, another big problem with a lot of, today's philosophies around how we grow in the worlds of marketing. It's almost the byproduct of the data revolution in marketing, right? Where it's so many great things, but on the flip side, there's so many dangers to, having and relying on those data points, because you can prove anything that you really want. And if you say, great, I grew my followers by X amount, but you're not actually accomplishing that, that thing that you're actually trying to drive towards.
Yeah. It's funny
because finding out what your own best practice is there, right? Which I think is a really great takeaway. Yeah.
Right. It's like creative people and creative teams. They have this like dual mindedness where like they're creating things that they love, but others love too. They're doing things. They're very sensitive to the world around them. Everything is inspiration, but they're also critical of the world around them. Everything is, I have to question that and find the first principle. I'm not going to accept it at face value. Right. So you have these dualities in the same brain or the same team. And I find that, when we talk about generating outcomes, we should probably focus more on the process that generates the outcome. But it's because we care about generating better outcomes, right? So it's almost like stop caring about results, start caring about the process that generates results. But at the same time, you care about both. It's just that I think we anchor too much to the outcomes, to the mile marker or kilometer marker, to the goal, instead of the behavior change we need to reach the goal. And I think that really incentivizes a lot of fear-based reactive work or average commodity work, because rather than relying on the uniqueness of you and your team, you're going out there in some vague notion to find your answers and find your ideas. And I think there's like a switch we can make, which is to stop acting like experts who care about the absolutes, right? What's the right answer in theory? And instead start acting like investigators who are masters at asking great questions about the situation, the world around them, right? And they may know some of the expertise, but they don't care if that doesn't apply here. They are on the case in their context. And so we can ask great questions instead of seeking everyone else's answers. Suddenly you start to, I think, make better decisions for your situation.
Hot on the heels of releasing Break the Wheel, Jay went down his own path of rediscovery, launching a new initiative called Marketing Showrunners. It's an online community and resource hub to further the craft of developing an original content series as a B2B brand. It comes at a time when content marketing itself is discovering its own new best practices, and it just may be his very own Mona Lisa.
So Unthinkable is the name of my personal podcast, and Unthinkable's been a labor of love, kind of a laboratory to figure out how to do differentiated podcasts where it's not just a straight up interview show. I tried a bunch of different styles and learned the medium. And inbound came a couple of prospective clients who asked me to make shows for them. So I started a business as a hired host and executive producer for branded shows. So I did a few podcasts, did a few videos where I'm going in the field, kind of documentary style with a crew, all very fun stuff. But I don't aspire to create an agency, and I don't want to keep trading time for dollars. And so, I broke myself a little bit in, let's say it's in the name of learning on behalf of all marketers everywhere. Let's go with that.
We appreciate it, Jay. You're a giver. You're
a
giver.
Yes. I can has coffee now, please. And maybe a nap. But about a year ago, so we're talking in September of 2019. So about a year ago, I realized I kept having the same conversations. I kept answering the same questions with prospects. I kept seeing the same mistakes that people were making, whether we were working together or not. And I realized, look, this is happening. Brands are trying to figure out how to make original series, if it's a podcast or a video show or both for their brands. Brands are realizing the goal is not just pure awareness. It's to increase the affinity people have towards you. It's not opening the top of the funnel, it's straightening the whole damn thing. It's building trust. Shows are the best vehicle for doing all of that. They're like trust accelerants, and they provide endless marketing efficiencies for all your teammates too. So they're these wonderful things for your brand. They're these wonderful things for your team. And for me, the most important thing is they're these wonderful things for the audience. Because if the goal is to hold attention, you can't game that system. You only have to give great experiences to that individual or group of people. There's no huckster in the world who can like game an algorithm and convince you to invest 3 hours this month with them, right? Because as soon as you start to invest that time, if they're not delivering on what was promised, you're out. So I love that. We're reaching this nice equilibrium between brands and the audience we serve, which is a term I got from a startup founder named Patrick Campbell. He himself and his business just launched a whole network of shows. And they're a boring business, profit well. They have SaaS analytics. So if you run a software as a service business, you get your financial metrics through ProfitWell. They have a whole network of 12 different video and audio experiences, shows, And it's a boring topic. They don't care. They make it exciting for their audience. They're like the CNN of SaaS analytics, right?
Yep.
So they're just one of very many brands, MailChimp, you name it, making original series. I'm like, okay, this is happening. This is a movement that's boiling. There's no home. There's no educational center.
Yeah.
We need a community. So I was like, let me switch from client services to publishing, which is kind of my power alley anyway. And Marketing Showrunners was born. And so our goal is to advance the craft of brands making original series to build brand affinity. And we want to help with all stages, with all our content. And we are obviously creating shows ourselves, but the starting point is a newsletter and a blog. And I'll tell you, Tyler, like I've been lucky to do a lot of projects online. I've never seen the caliber marketer that's subscribing to this to MSR. It's like companies from Red Bull to Roku. Yep. I mentioned MailChimp, like these really blue chip, pristine brands. Salesforce, Shopify, the BBC we have subscribers from, all the way down to startups and SMBs. So it's like everyone's trying to figure this out. And so I'm like, okay, let's do it together. Let me bring together tech vendors, practitioners, big brands and small brands, people from the media, and learn from all these people, right? What insights can we have? Can we serve not just marketing practitioners with a list of tips and tricks? That's everywhere. We know what podcast equipment do I need? That's everywhere. Yep. What about the strategy? What about creative differentiation? What about audience development and measurement? What about actually doing something that sounds differentiated and has like a brand moat around it, brand IP, not just yet another podcast or video show. So You got me on my soapbox because I couldn't be more excited about MSR, but I'm even more excited about this movement of marketers towards making shows because I think it's good for all parties involved.
Yeah. Well, I couldn't agree more. I think it is a super interesting idea and a super interesting concept. And I know for me, even as I started to think about this notion, it immediately elevated my own thinking and perspective on the potential of our creativity, right? Because it was when you step back and you go, okay, what if we were to engage our audience with something that sort of, rose to that caliber, something that would genuinely be bringing them back to be listening, to be watching, to be engaging for hours and hours a month? What would that be? It's actually a really interesting forcing function for us to sit down and go, what is that? Like, so, that can't just be, okay, whatever it is we're writing on our blog in this format and this and that. And I think it's a really interesting exercise that, frankly, I think any marketing team should go through, whether or not they plan to launch a show. But if you say, if I were to do that, right, what would be relevant, interesting, creative enough, and it might actually spur ideas either for a show or even for other elements of what you do, right?
Right. And, I want brands to be launching shows that serve them too, serve the brand, serve the company, because, I see a lot of people, there's a good example, Hot Ones on YouTube. So Hot Ones is a show by a channel called First We Feast, which is exploring the intersection of pop culture and food. So they have this wonderful show on the channel, Hot Ones. The whole idea is the host, Sean Evans, interviews celebrities. But the way he does it is he has them eat a spicy wing per question. Right. And he does like 10 questions. Right. And the wings get spicier and spicier. Right. And they remix the shows with different clever segments. And he's a wonderful researcher and interviewer. Yeah. So he has chops, but they have this hook of the hotter and hotter wings. Now, I saw a sales enablement tech platform do Hot Ones, but interviewing sales and marketing leaders. And I was like, so disappointed. I was like, that's a gimmick. Like, you're trying to do something that's proven elsewhere. It doesn't make sense for your brand. So what I want from brands is to have this strategic lens over what concept can we have that expresses our brand values, whether it's the entirety of the brand or one theme or moment or idea that really truly matters to our audience and they want to go deep with it. How do we create a concept around that feels delicious? No pun intended. We're not doing the hot wings thing here. We're doing something that's relevant to us, right? If you're about food and pop culture, sure, interview celebrities over spicy wings. But how do you break a show down? Because it's just three things. It's a concept that sits over the whole show. It's an episode format, and there might be several throughout your show if you have mini-series or whatever. And then it's talent. And if you have a strategy for your concept, your format, and your talent, it feels knowable. It feels doable. And I want brands to do that in a way that aligns with their brand and their audience interest. And back to the beginning of our talk here and how this all ties together, I don't want it to be a random act of creativity. Right. I don't want it to be a stunt. I want it to feel concrete, attainable, and most importantly, authentic to who you are as a brand and as a team.
Yeah. Yeah. Are you seeing, so tying back to that of like making sure that it is something that the brand truly, is behind and it's an extension of them. Are you seeing shows exclusively of what we would consider the traditional top of funnel, sort of intended to be driving breadth and audience building and engagement? Or are you seeing organizations thinking about concepts for shows that, maybe apply to different niche audiences, more of a narrow casting, maybe even towards their, focused area of their customer base, or that are more designed, to move people throughout what one would consider the traditional buyer's journey, if you will?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I look at like a MailChimp is basically doing the traditional, I say that in air quotes because it's a little new for a brand, but the traditional top of funnel content. So they want to know, or they know that their audience is largely entrepreneurs or people with the entrepreneurial spirit. Great. So they're actually acquiring shows or they're greenlighting and paying for shows. They're not making them in-house. They have MailChimp Presents as this wing of their marketing team and this network of shows. And I think within the first 6 months of 2019, they launched 8 films or original series, both podcasts and video.
Wild.
It's nuts. I'm tired just saying that sentence. And okay, they're all about entrepreneurship, some in music, some in, Main Street brick and mortar businesses, digital businesses, shifting career paths is a show so it's wonderful entertainment, right? Now they understand, or so their head of content there, Mark DiCristina says publicly, when we have multiple touch points across multiple episodes or multiple shows, it significantly increases the likelihood of purchase, or customers who have the interactivity with the shows stick around, so their lifetime value is greater, right? Now, more power to them if they actually know that that's true. But I'm really interested in shows that are not monetary, or shows that aren't budget based. We're not throwing money at the problem. Not that MailChimp doesn't have a strategy. It's hard to know from the outside looking in. But companies that you wouldn't assume would do this are doing this. And so I mentioned Profitwell before. Have you encountered their content at all, Tyler?
Yeah, I checked out what they're doing with their Recur network to bring those things together and to actually, make it. I think it's build it out as a bigger brand across that SaaS world, and I think it's fascinating.
Right. So here's a business that they too want to reach some entrepreneurs or entrepreneurial minded people because they're running software businesses. That those are their customers, software businesses, and they have a network that they announced, Recur. They have 4 shows or 5 shows in market. And they're going to try to have a show release every day of the week. That's their goal. Right. But they're not all like MailChimp. They're not all 45-minute long interviews. They're not all docu-style. Some of them are newsy. They have this great daily show that it has 3 blocks to it. And the first block is news, but the second 2 are experiments. And if the experiments go well, they'll spin out a block and make it a whole show, a standalone show, right? So it's a lab. So they have this economical approach to it where they film a season in a day and they distribute it across months of marketing. So they're on the flip side, still in B2B, still SaaS, still reaching a similar audience. They're not actually purchasing shows. They're doing in-house work with 6 people and a studio. But they're changing their behavior to do that. Their first hire wasn't a blogger, it was a videographer. Right. The CEO is on one show, but also some of the teammates are. So it's not just an executive-led personality thing. They know too that they can actually attribute, the CEO is on record saying they can attribute several millions of dollars in annual revenue to their shows for a business between 10 and 20 million per year. That's huge. That's enormous. So it doesn't matter the sector. You'll find the macro and the micro type companies, and they're all embracing this need to make shows, but they're not all doing it with this top of funnel MailChimp approach. Like Profitwell has some that they are aware. It's you think about changing your pricing, you watch pricing page teardown. That's not top of funnel content. It feels like it because it's so enjoyable. That's great. They're making mid or bottom funnel content feel like entertainment, but it's boring to me right now. I'm not thinking about changing my pricing. If I was though, man, that's like Game of Thrones.
Oh, lower CAC, higher LTV. Original shows are like the no-calorie triple chocolate fudge ice cream of the marketing world. And yes, this is the second time I've gotten to eat dessert on the show. Yet another reason why producing shows can be way better than writing ebooks. Now, if you're the one drooling for more ideas and more inspiration for how to create your own unique shows that trump the best practices, here's where to go to learn more.
So marketingshowrunners.com, that's our organization, and it's completely free to read for now. I think we're going to do some paid subscription eventually, but
So
we're
get
early
there
days.
now.
So get while the getting's good. But you can subscribe to the newsletter. We send it once a month. And we also do recurring blog content all week long. We do have a podcast in the works. We do have a video show in the works, all that good stuff. But, the thing I would point to most importantly is if, depending on when you're hearing or watching this, where all of November 2019 is what we're calling Make the Case month. So for marketers that already believe, podcasting, video shows, yes, we're going to need to do those. Whether you're an executive or a frontline practitioner, Make the Case month is all about what are shows for, how do we articulate the value, data, examples, trying to understand the different formats that we can use from outside the echo chamber to make it differentiated, all the parts and pieces that you would need to put together the business case and make sure you're successful. That's Make the Case month in November. So if you're listening to this, watching this, I'd push you to that content. It'll be available long after November's over too.
The best way to create more personal connections with your audience is to have them spend hours with you in their car, at the gym, at their desk, or even in their bed. And the only way to do that without getting a restraining order is to deliver them exceptional content week over week that they actually look forward to engaging with. Or in other words, by delivering them an original episodic series that's unique and valuable, that's worthy of holding their attention, and is the Game of Thrones equivalent for their business needs. Whether or not you plan to create your own show anytime soon, I encourage you to check out Marketing Showrunners as a place to discover new ideas and new inspiration so you can unlock your own new ideas and your own new inspiration. Thanks for joining us on Creating Connections, brought to you by the fine folks here at Vidyard. If you enjoyed the show, give it a like or a share, hit that subscribe button for future episodes, and check out the podcast version now available on your favorite podcast platform.